Hello, welcome back to the channel Side by Side. Today's tutorial will be on how to make this beautiful palazzo pants with a sustenance or a pinafore. Do subscribe to the channel, share to friends, and don't forget to turn on your notification bell. Fabric I'll be working with. The first thing first I did was to fold my fabric into two this way. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to be inserting the measurements. Guys, this is the full length of my trouser. This is the start line. Okay, the length I'm working with is 44 inches. So from here to 40, around 44 inches to the down. Then the next thing I'm going to be marking is the hip line, which is at 8 inches from this start line to this point. That's my hip line at 8 inches. After that, we'll now mark our crotch depth. To get our crotch depth, what we'll divide is your hip divide by 4, then you add extra 1 inch to it to get to your crotch depth. So my hip I'm working with is 39. When I divide it by 4, I have 9.75 plus 1, I have 10.75. So I'm going to approximately make it 11 inches, which is here. So having marked these things now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be working with my hip measurements. So the hip measurement divided by 4 is 9.75 plus 1 inch, making it 10.75. The 1 inch extra is for my seam allowance. I'll mark it on my crotch depth line. I also go ahead and mark it on my hip line. And I also mark it on the waistline. Having done this, I'll connect the 3 points together. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to divide my waist measurements by 4. Okay, and mark it on my waistline. So my waist measurement is 7.5, which is here, plus 1 inch seam allowance. Then from here, I'm going to connect it to my hip line. So this is what I have. Okay, the next thing we're going to be doing is around lap measurement, the upper parts of your lap. You divide it by 2. So mine is 24 inches. When I divide it by 2, I'll have 12 inches, which is here. And I'm going to be adding extra 1 inch for seam allowance. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to be connecting it, making a curve from my hip line into my crotch depth. So this is what I have. Now we're done with this upper part of our trouser. The part we're going to be working with now is the down part of the trouser. This is the down part of my trouser. What I'm going to measure here is what I have at the crotch depth area. So I have 13 inches. I'll go ahead and mark my 13 inches, starting from this center line. 13 inches, which is here. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to be dividing these 13 inches into 2 to get the midpoint of it. So the midpoint is 6.5. Okay, now at this point we are trying to determine how wide our palazzo leg or trouser leg is going to be. Okay, so if you want it bigger, you can go ahead and make use of the 6.5 inches you have. Fine. If you want it moderate, now it depends on how wide you want yokes to be. So for the essence of this tutorial, I'm going to be working with 5 inches on both sides. So from these midpoints, I marked 5 inches here. From here, I'm also marking 5 inches. Okay, so from the crotch depth, I'm going to be connecting it to these points I have here, to these 5 inches. This is how the length of my trouser is. That is the wideness of the bottom of the trouser. This is how wide it's going to be. So now I'm going to go ahead and connect it together. So this is from crotch depth. I'm connecting it to these 5 inches I have here. So this is what I have. The same thing I did here, I also do it to the side. Okay. So this is what we have. Now we're going to be marking, cutting this off. But before then, we're going to work on the upper part a little. I'm going to go ahead to do is to cut this piece out. So now we're going to be using this to cut out our back piece. At this point, I've gone ahead to place my front piece on top of a folded fabric again. This is what I have. Now on the side, this center side, I'm going to be adding extra 2 inches to my fabric. Okay, so from this point now, I'm going to add 2 inches to the down. The same thing applicable here. I'm also going to go ahead and add 2 inches. And this is what I have. The same thing I did from the hip line, covering it into my crotch depth for the front. That's what I'm also going ahead to do here. Okay. After marking the dots, I'll connect them together. And this is what we have. Now, coming to the upper part of our um, Ankara piece, for the back, I'm going to be going up by 1 inch. Okay, and this is where my 1 inch falls. For the back, I'm going up by 1 inch. You can decide to go up by 1.5 for your back. Okay, so now from that 1 inch I went up, I'm going to be connecting it to the waistline of our front. And this is what I have. Okay, then for my front piece, I'm going to be coming down by 1 inch. So from here now, I'll mark my 1 inch down. Then I'm going to connect it to the waistline. Don't know if you understand what I did. From the back piece, I went up by 1 inch. Then for the front piece, I came down by 1 inch. Everything I connected it to the waistline. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece out. So our back piece went up higher by 1, and the front piece came down lower by 1. So this is what our palazzo pants looks like. Alright, so at this point now, you can go ahead and make it into a trouser, because this is what your trouser will be looking like. But because this is going to be having a pinafore, we'll now work on the upper parts of our trouser. Okay, but before then, I'll open this up. So this is my right side and this is my right side too. So I'm going to be placing each leg right side to right side. So this is one of the leg for the back and this is one of the leg for the back. Then this is for the front. So I'm placing it in pair, front and back together, front and back together. You understand? And this is what I have here. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and join them together, like each leg together, just like what I arranged here now. So for this side, let's work with this side first. From this start point line, I'm going to be marking, stitching, let me say half an inch, because I want a pocket to be on my trouser. If you don't want a pocket to be on yours, it's totally fine. Go ahead and run a stitch down. Okay, run a stitch to the bottom. So because there's going to be a pocket here, I'm going to run half an inch, then give a spacing of 7 inches for my pockets. All right, so from this point now, I will stitch it down. Okay, then when I'm done with that side, I'm going to come over to the center part and also stitch the center part, but I'm not going to be touching this crotch area. I'm not touching it. I'm just shaping, running a stitch on the two sides. So that's what I'm also going to go ahead and do to this side. Okay, this is what the trouser looks like. This is what we have. Okay, now we're going to be joining the two legs together. All right, so I'm going to pick one of the fronts and one of the fronts, like one left, one right. Okay, and I'm going to be placing it right sides facing each other like this. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to go ahead to join it, run a stitch on it. I'll do this till I get to the crotch line here, the joining between these two of them. Please make sure that the two of them are equal. You continue with your stitching. Then 2 inches after the crotch line, please start diverting your stitching in a V format, in a V shape. Okay, or in a slant way. So that's what I'm going to do. Then I'm going to leave about 8 to 9 inches from the waistline open for my zip. Okay, that's what I'm going to go ahead to do now. Alright guys, so the next thing I want ahead to cut out is the band. So the band is going to be 5 inches bold and it's going to be two band, okay, because they're going to be turning out one with the other. So this is what I have, is into 2 places. Then I'm going to notch the center point of this band. Now I'm going to go ahead and notch the center. So this is the center of my band. This band will be able to go round our trouser, our palazzo pants. Okay, now the next thing I'm also going to go ahead to notch now is where our sustenance is going to be. Okay, what I mean by the sustenance is the belt. All right, that is what I mean. So I'm also going to go ahead and notch where I'm going to place it. So for the sustenance now, I'm going to be placing it on my bust panel, that is my nipple to nipple. So from this center point, I'm going to measure 5 inches. Okay, that's where I'm going to place my 4.5 inches, sorry, that's where I'm going to place this band. Okay, the nipple to nipple is 4 inches, but I added extra half an inch. All right, that's where I'm going to place the sustenance. So from here now, I also go ahead and place mark 4.5 inches. Then I'm going to notch it. This way. This way. This is for my front side. Then for the back piece, what I'm going to do is, from here now, since our waist is 28 inches, no, our waist is 30 inches, all right? So 30 divided by 2 will give us 15, Okay, so from here, from the center points, I'll be able to mark 15, which is going round our skirt. So this is where my 15 inches stops. Please don't mind the SXs. I left it should in case if it's not going to fit into the trouser, I will trim it off. Okay, so this is where our 15 inches lies here. Okay, and this is where the front piece stops. Our front piece stops at 7.5. So from this point now, I'm also going to go ahead and mark 4.5 inches. This is where my back belt or back sustenance is going to lie here. So I'm going to go ahead and notch it. I don't know if you understand what I mean. Okay, let's repeat it again. This is the center point of our belt, of our band. Okay, so from this center point now, we'll divide our waist measurement by 2 to give us 15 inches. So this is where our 15 inches stays, and our sustenance or our belt is going to be on our bust panel or nipple to nipple points. Okay, so from this center point now, I marked 4.5. The nipple to nipple is 4 inches, but I marked extra half an inch. So this is 4.5 inches. This is where our first front is going to be. Then for the back, you divide this your 15 into 2. Okay, 15.5 you have, 15 inches you have to get 7.5, which is here. So from this 7.5, you also mark your 4.5 inches to get your back sustenance. Okay, so the same thing I will do to this place. 15, then get my 7.5, which is here. So from there I'll mark 4.5 where my back sustenance is going to be. Okay, is that well understood now? So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be introducing the sustenance. So this is what I have for my length of the sustenance is 32 inches. The half length, which is 16 inches times 2, because it's going to go over to the back, made it 32 inches. Okay, so guys, at this point now, I've gone ahead to turn out my piece, my sustenance on my belt. Okay, and I've placed it this way. I've placed it in between the two bands. Okay, this is what I have on the points we marked. So I also went ahead to hold it down with a pin, all right, so that it will be easy for me to stitch. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to go ahead and run a stitch on it. At this point now, you can decide to add a hairstay or hemming gum to your band, which is totally fine. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and run a stitch on this, then I'm going to turn it out. All right, when I turn it out, this is what it's going to look like. But first of all, let's go ahead and run a stitch on it. We're not touching this part, we're only running a stitch on the upper part here. So when I'm done, this is what I have. This is what the band belt holder looks like. Now I'm going to be attaching this to my trouser part, so I'm going to go ahead and do it center to center. Okay, so this is the center of my band and this is the center of my trouser. From this point now, I'll go ahead and run a stitch on it to the down, to the end, to the back piece. The same thing for this area. All right, so this is where I'm going to be fixing my zipper. Okay, so I'll go ahead and fix my zipper. You can also decide to remove 1 inch, making it 14 in total. Okay, well, the reason why I'm removing this is because we removed 1 inch from our front piece. Okay, so that's why I am removing this, so that our waist area is going to be firm after inserting your zip. So now go ahead and fix your zip to your pants.